Okay, I have 9:31, so I think I'm going to get us started for today. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this cold Friday morning. My name's Tony Atts. I'm the chair for the P&A Senate. We are getting started right away today with actually a presentation. We have Gopalan Nadathwar and Eric Van Wyck from the Academic Tenure, Freedom and Tenure Committee here to talk about an AF&T task force report that was completed in 2024. I wanted to specify to the group, because you might have seen this report in the past, the report is completed, so this isn't a request for feedback from AF&T, but rather a presentation about the report with an opportunity for us to ask questions. Following this meeting, Molly and I are going to draft a summary of any remaining questions, comments, concerns that we have and send that back to Eric and Gopalan for their review. They'll follow up with us and we'll report back to the Senate. So we're going to have kind of a closed loop conversation about the report. So if your question doesn't come up, please feel free to send that to us in an email in the next day or so, and we'll be sure to include that as well. But with that, I'll turn things over to our guests from the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee, Eric Van Wyck and Gopalan Nadathwar.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, no, we're pleased to be able to be here to discuss this report that came out of the task force. So I'm going to try and share my screen here first. Let's see. I think that looks about right. All right. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that without any trouble. So yeah, so I'm Eric Van Wyck. I'm currently the chair of the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee, and Gopalan is a past chair and chaired the task force. So um, yeah, so the first sort of thing I think to sort of discuss is what sort of led to this, right? So essentially, it sort of boils down to wanting to understand. Sorry. And so I think we all sort of have a reasonable understanding of academic freedom, right? The idea is that this is something we need in our teaching and our research, right? What allows us to sort of teach in the way that is sort of required, full exposition of ideas. And in research, of course, it's about being able to do the work we think is required and present that and report that out in a responsible way. Right, so we certainly understand this in teaching, right? If we recall a few years ago, there was this episode at Hamlin University where someone was not renewed from their contingent position because of some concerns in the classroom that were not really well founded. So these are important issues that in it's an important thing we need protections for. The concern, though, is that in 2020, over 40% of our faculty colleagues at the U were in these contingent positions where they don't really have effective protections for their academic freedom. Right. And so the committee spent a good year sort of investigating this issue, discovered a number of problems that had been sort of raised, and decided that a task force was needed to sort of go off and investigate this issue further. Part of the reason for that is the committee just didn't have the time to dive into this in the deep way that was needed. Also, the committee did not have as many P&A and term faculty members that are needed to sort of fully understand the problem. And so the task force was then created as part of a resolution that came out of the faculty senate. Right, and the task force was really just designed to go off and do this deep dive to understand the state of affairs, and then report back to the faculty senate with their findings. The charge of the task force, right? So this is an important part of this, right? Was really to go out, collect the data, read a lot of documents, understand sort of the current state of affairs at the institution, and then try and develop some recommendations, sort of broadly speaking, of what might be done to try and address concerns that had been discovered, right? So the charge was not to come up with a complete implementation and consult with all parties. It was to sort of dive into the problem itself. So the faculty senate wasn't consulted in this effort either. It was just an effort to guide to sort of figure out what the main issues are. The task force, right, was composed at, I guess, fall of 23. Gopalan talked to lots and lots of people in setting this up. In the end, there were, I think, 6 P&A faculty on the task force, 5 term faculty, and 7 tenure-track faculty. And this was especially useful to collect documents and data from across the institution in various departments and colleges. So, yeah, Twin Cities representation is also non-Twin City campuses were there. There's an ex officio member from the provost office. And so that was sort of the gist of what happened, right? Is the creation of this thing. And so the committee, the task force rather, examined a lot of data, read a lot of documents, and then wrote this report with some recommendations. So, and this was then submitted to I guess, submitted to AF&T then that June of 2024 before it then went off to be presented at our committee, AF&T, TFAPS, the Term Faculty and Academic Professionals Subcommittee, Faculty Senate, FCC, and so now here. So, and with that, I think I will turn it over to Gopalan for the next couple slides. So,
Can you hear me?
yep.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so I'm going to focus in my brief remarks on the most important observation and the associated recommendations of the task force, right? This also accords well with the purpose of this meeting because it is this part that is of most interest, I think, to the P&A Senate. And there are several details that I could also talk about, but I'll leave this to a closer reading of the report, and it probably is germane to this meeting. So the key understanding that came out of the perusal of the various documents and policies that the task force had to carry out is that there's exactly one policy at the university level that serves the purpose of providing academic freedom protections for faculty members at the university. And this document is entitled the Board of Regents Policy, Faculty Tenure. The title of the document is actually a little misleading because it is really a policy governing faculty appointments, right? The title seems to suggest it's only about tenure, but it's really something that is governing faculty appointments. Tenure happens to be a major issue in this context, and it is in fact the instrument around which the due process protections are built. So academic freedom is, of course, an issue of concern for all faculty. So the Board of Regents policy is aware of this fact, and it resolves this conflict, so to speak, apparent conflict, by requiring that all faculty appointments be made under its scope, right? So this is not a side issue. This requirement is made quite explicit in Section 3 of the policy, which discusses the various varieties of faculty and stipulates that faculty titles can only be used for people covered by the policy, right? This is something that keeps coming up over and over again. The AF&T, when I was the chair, we had lots of discussions about this and so forth. So it's kind of important to understand this particular issue. The problem, however, is that this intent of the Board of Regents policy that it apply to all faculty appointments has been thwarted by the creation of a parallel faculty track that's outside its scope. Right? So there are two difficulties that arise from this. The first is that because the creation of such a track is contrary to the stipulations that all faculty appointments be made under the mentioned policy, the appointments in the second track cannot be given genuine faculty status, right? And this is the issue that I was saying that keeps coming up, right? People in the P&A faculty track would like to have professorial titles, but they're told that it's a violation of the faculty of the Board of Regents policy. And it's really, this is where the contradiction is, okay? The second difficulty, which is also a consequence of the first, is that people who are employed in the second track, right, that's a P&A faculty track, they do not benefit from the due process protections in the Board of Regents policy, and there is no alternative university level policy that provides such protections, right? At this point, I should highlight the fact that there might be administrative policies, they do not carry the force of law, right? They are things that are constituted by a provost or something, or a dean, and you can't sort of take it up in a serious legal argument that that policy is not being followed, because it can be changed at any time by the administrator, right? So there's a difference between a university level policy and an administrative policy. Okay? So this actually brings us to the main recommendation of the task force. And this recommendation is simply that all personnel whose role at the university is to contribute to its long-term research and teaching mission, they should be brought under the scope of the Board of Regents policy. This is quite similar to the reclassification demand in the reinvestment resolution of the University Senate in 2023. The main difference is that the task force has recommended this, saying that it is needed in order to stop the violation of the Board of Regents policy. Okay? There's an auxiliary recommendation that's also important, and this is that the Board of Regents policy arises from the fact that the Board of Regents policy puts the primary focus on faculty members who are employed in the tenure track, right? Since many faculty members have appointments outside this track, the task force has also called for the augmentation of this policy with additional stipulations that are aimed at providing due process protections for such non-tenured faculty members. Eric, could you move to the next slide? Yeah, so this actually brings us to the question of what is to follow the preparation and submission of this report. Since the task force was commissioned by the Faculty Senate, it needed to present this report, right, to that Senate. And that happened exactly a year back, on February 6th, 2025. The Faculty Senate now needs to vote on whether to take up the recommendations of the task force, and that may happen this spring. So the next question is, what happens if the Faculty Senate decides to adopt the recommendations? Well, in this case, the Faculty Senate would need to work towards its implementation, right? So what is involved in the implementation? Well, the first step in this regard is to assess what would need to happen towards realizing the process of reclassification and to come into genuine compliance with the Board of Regents policy. So this is quite an involved issue, and it requires taking into consideration a lot of practical matters. The task force didn't feel that it should get into the details of that till the Faculty Senate has decided that it's going to act on its recommendations. But what it has recommended is a process. So it says this process should start with, it should be run bottom up, because departments really know what is involved. So they should figure it out. They should be given 6 months to do that, right? And they should essentially bring out all the issues that are involved into the open. Right? The second step, which should start concurrently with the first, is that a task force should be constituted to use all the information that is obtained in this fashion, and also to discuss matters with the administration towards developing a practical reclassification plan that could be realized in a fixed period of time, right? The fixed period is important, because otherwise the idea of coming up with reclassification can become meaningless, right? It can be an open-ended thing that never happens. Okay, so the report notes in particular that any such plan must ensure that the career interests of anyone who would be affected by the reclassification process that is designed should be taken into consultation, should be consulted in this process. Towards this end, it has been explicit that the implementation task force must have a broad representation. It should include P&A faculty, term faculty, etc. And this phase is also one in which we expect and insist that the P&A faculty and the various governance instruments, such as the P&A Senate and TFAPs, and be consulted in addition to the Faculty Senate and particular committees that it oversees. Right? Another part of the recommendations is to develop the missing component of the policy that provides stronger due process protections for faculty members who are not under the tenure track, or who are not on the tenure track. And all this is sort of, at this point, till the plan has been developed, etc., it's essentially on paper. The final step is, of course, to actually implement it. And this step would require consultation with the administration and also with the Board of Regents. And this is, it's recommended that the Faculty Senate at the appropriate time take up this consultation so that it can actually put into force, so that one can actually put into force any plan that is developed for reclassification. So with that, I can stop because that probably gives you as much of a sense as I think is important in this meeting of what is in the report. The rest of it you can look up by reading the report itself.
It's a little hard to see, but we do have someone with their hand up already.
Yeah, hi. So this question's been swirling around in my head for a little while as I've been kind of hearing about this process moving forward. And it might be something that has to be worked out at the department level, but I'm curious, what are you going to do with master's level instructors? Because from what I understand, you have to have a terminal degree to get a tenure track position at the U. And yeah, I was just kind of curious if there's any plan to address that.
So should I take the question, Eric?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Right. So there's a misconception here. There's no need to have a PhD to have a faculty appointment. And in fact, I mean, in my department, we have few people who do not have a PhD who are professors. So there is nothing of this sort so it's an issue that departments have to resolve. They have to decide what are requirements for having professorial positions, etc. Right, and also to have a tenured position. Right, I know good universities in which people who only got an undergraduate degree, right? Princeton is an example, have been chaired professors from maybe the third year after they got their undergraduate degree, right? So it has nothing to do with the intellectual aspects directly, having a terminal degree, right? So these are things that the departments can consider, right? The task force itself hasn't sort of provided an opinion on it, right? What it has said is that these are things that you have to discuss at the department level, come up with what are required criteria, and then think of how to enact it into policy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I might just add one other thing, right? These are genuine worries, right? I mean, people who are in the P&A category whom one might have to consider reclassification, right? These are genuine worries, right? But again, the task force hasn't said here, go ahead and implement this set of requirements, right? What it has said is set up a task force that will look at all the issues that are involved, right, in an implementation, sort them out, right, and then come up with an implementation plan, right? And in that process, you consult broadly with P&A Senate, with P&A faculty, try and understand their concerns as well, right? So that's the stage at which real consultation is required, and everybody must insist on that.
If I could just add, I think on top of this, right, the task force report is pretty clear that, we have to take into account people who've been at this institution a long time and make sure that their careers are respected. And part of it is seeing a difference between the transition to, a final state of things where reclassification has happened and what do we do in the meantime to get there, right? And so making sure that folks' careers are not disrupted by this is really one of the prime importance here as well. Should I call on people, Tony? Is that easier?
Yeah, I was going to say, feel free to go ahead and call on folks.
Okay. Maybe I'll just do that, Gopal, and we can see who answers questions. So Lauren, I guess I see your hand next. So
Yeah, thanks. Sorry. If I'm looking over here, it's because all of you are on my other screen. But just to follow up on that question and the response to it, my question is about I don't know if that like consultation and decision making at the department level, is that sort of like an intermediary step, or is that sort of the final step to making those reclassifications? Because I can imagine that if those decisions are made finally at the department level, that could open up the door for a lot of inequities between similar departments. So I'm just curious how you're envisioning that process working.
Should I take that up again, Eric?
sure.
Right. No, so see what the department needs to do is to bring out the issues that are involved in the reclassification, right? Right. It's not in the hands of the departments to carry it out, right? It's not even, they don't have the final say in what exactly the process would be. That process is what the task force for implementation is supposed to be charged with, right? So that's the thing that needs to make it an unbiased process, right? I mean, and it has to pay attention to equity and so forth. So it's kind of important that it be broadly constituted, right? People who can look after the interests of the P&A faculty should be part of it. The other thing to note is that what that task force is doing is it's evolving a plan, right? It doesn't have the ability to actually enact it, right? So this is an issue that we should be clear about, right? Right now, it is still an exercise on paper, right? Find out, the first recommendation is go through this reclassification, right? If that faculty senate accepts it, the next step is to figure out what is involved in reclassification and how you can carry it out, right? And then the final part of it is actually using that plan to make it happen, right? So it's far removed from anything that the department ends up controlling, right? Right. So there's a process involved. Yeah.
All right, I just see your your X500 there in the corner. So
Sorry, it's Holly Locker. I don't know why it's saying that, but good to see you all. One just quick point and then a question that for the last number of years, OHR has been pretty clear that we've not been able to reclassify people into entirely different lanes. So from P&A into faculty job codes. So that's going to have to be a hurdle tackled with all of this. Second, since, and this sort of touches on Josh's comment in the chat, but since this is the P&A Senate, in order for, I'm in psychology, in order for someone to be tenured in psychology, you know, we have our 712, and they have to meet the teaching, research, and service criterion in there. None of our P&As do all three of those because it's just we hire them to teach. So never would there be a case in which they would qualify. But are you saying that you're seeing differences in that across the campus, that you are finding P&As who are doing the equivalent of a, you know, tenured faculty job, all three at that level, including
well,
research?
yeah, maybe I'll take this one. An important thing in the board policy is that to get tenure, you can't get tenure only for your service work, right? There's nothing that precludes you being a tenured professor for your teaching work. And so the 712s in most departments are ones where they expect research to be done, right? So part of this initial phase in the departments is to go write, you know, another 712 for people who would be tenured but be teaching only, or teaching with a smaller focus on research but a larger focus on teaching, right? The departments would have to sort of sort that out, right? Our department just approved policies for P&A and term faculty that kind of look like 712s, right? But they're not part of the board policy. And so that's the thing that would sort of happen, is the department would say, well, all right, if this goes forward and teaching is a valid thing for earning tenure, which is true based on the tenure code, then, you know, you have to sort of write down, well, what does it mean? What are the expectations and goals of folks doing that? And so that's where, you know, P&A folks would sort of come into under the board policy for faculty appointments, right? And then folks who are in the term category, right, are now sort of here for a long time, but this is also in violation of parts of the policy that it exists now. And so they would be sort of moving from term into tenure track, right? And again, they may still be teaching only or primarily, but those 712s have to be developed for that kind of faculty member.
So I want to add a couple of things to first, Holly, I mean, you raised the OHR, right? These are intellectual questions, right? OHR doesn't involve itself with intellectual questions. And so this was one of the things that the task force decided very early in the game. It said, we cannot let issues about academic freedom and faculty status and so forth be dictated by what OHR says, right? So there are issues that have to be sorted out, but they need to come in the next step. The first thing to deal with are the intellectual questions. And that's where we are right now. The second thing is that, some of the things that you mentioned, such as your department, psychology department doesn't allow people who only teach to be tenured. This is also something that requires intellectual justification, right? So the department has to articulate its rationale for saying, we want people in the department who are in the employed long-term in the teaching, in a teaching capacity, but we also want it to be the case that they do not get tenure, right? They might discover a contradiction and they might end up fixing it the way Eric was saying by revising the 712. But that they have to be asked to go through that process. Okay, so that's the basic, the first component of the recommendation that I talked about.
All right. Molly, I see your hand.
Thanks. And Gopalan, something you just said is related to exactly what I'm wondering about. So you just said that this is an intellectual question and OHR doesn't deal with intellectual questions. But what you're suggesting in this report is an OHR, I mean, like it's an HR process that would need to be followed to provide full academic freedom to anyone that we value teaching at our institution. So did the task force discuss or consider, rather than this, and I also think it's incredibly unlikely that any of these processes within each unit of changing 712s or getting people reclassified could happen within 6 months. I think that's very, very, very unlikely, especially because every department would require a lot of voting processes and discussions to make these things happen before we even get to the point of having people go through the process. So it would take years for many departments to get all of their P&A faculty reclassified if that's the process. And you also mentioned earlier something about the interim. So did the task force discuss or consider recommending to the Board of Regents that they actually create an academic freedom policy that does not exist within the tenure policy, so that it does in fact cover all of those people that we value putting forward our mission and teaching our classes?
Okay, so first, I should correct a particular, I should sort of comment on a particular comment that you made. The task force doesn't expect the departments to actually carry out a process in 6 months, right? To carry out a reclassification process, what it requires the department to do is in 6 months try and identify the issues that are involved, right, in reclassification, right? That's a different thing, right? What it's talking about is something like, I think it was, I don't remember the details now, of a 5-year window, right? Either 3 years or 5-year window over which the reclassification would have to be carried out. Okay, the process would have to be carried out. So it was realistic about this. Second thing is that, and we can get into a discussion separately about this, is that the Board of Regents policy, right, is based on work that has been done over 100 years, right? This was something that was started in 1915 when people realized academic freedom was really important. And they came up with a way of providing academic freedom for faculty, which is documented in an AAUP statement of principles. Lots of intellectuals, Einstein and John Dewey was the person who started it all, right? Lots of philosophers and so on were involved in developing this. And that basically is what the manifestation, and that's what is manifested in the faculty tenure policy, right? And its integrity depends on there being only one way of recognizing faculty, right? And I can explain that in more detail. So this was fundamental in our understanding of how academic freedom protections are provided. Right? And so we talked about it a little bit, but we decided that having multiple policies would not end up providing academic freedom protections for in a genuine way, and it might end up watering down whatever protections might already exist in the faculty tenure policy. So we didn't follow that path. And another thing to note is that these policies take a long time to create, right? And they require lots of deliberations and so forth, right? So asking for a separate policy to be created for another set of uh, another faculty track and making sure that it sort of accords with the existing policy for faculty in one track, in the other track, and so forth. These are things that take years to sort out. Yeah. And it's not necessarily a practical thing to do.
I think the other part of this too is that the tenure policy, right, is not only for tenure track faculty. There's the entire contract term faculty category in there. And so the distinction between term and P&A is one it's hard to see what the reasoning is for these sort of two kinds of contingent faculty members. And so the policy has sort of space in it for a tenure track and a non-tenure track. And so pulling people into that one large policy may involve adjustments in that policy, right? But having one way to talk about faculty seems like the most appropriate way to do this. So, Tony, I see your hand. So.
Sure, thanks so much. So I wanted to, I think, just raise a question. I essentially had the same comment as Molly around updating the Board of Regents policy. I work in the policy space, so I tend to think like, even if it's 10 years out, policy is going to make sense if we put the time into developing it and making it work well. But there was a question also from someone in the chat around this is also looking at focused non-tenure line faculty in addition to P&A faculty, correct? It's kind of anyone that's not falling. I'm seeing head nods. Okay. Um, the question that I had that, and I'm not in the faculty space, I'm not in the instructor space, but to me, when I hear tenure track, that means something. That tenure is a distinct possibility for that individual and they've been vetted for that. How would you, how would that change if you make every faculty member tenure track at the university? Does that still have any real meaning to be in a tenure track position?
I don't think every faculty member is on the tenure track, right? There is still the term category. Like clinical faculty are ones that are faculty, but they're not on the tenure track and they're here for a long time. But tenure is not tenure. It shouldn't be thought of as like this prize one gets for doing this, fantastic, exceptional sort of thing. It's really there to say, you've been here a while, you've demonstrated that you're good at what you're doing, and you should have protections to keep doing this thing you're good at doing, right? And so I'm not sure is that getting to your question or not, but it's not that it's, you know, being an excellent teacher qualifies one for these kinds of protections. And it's all about making sure people have protections for their academic freedom and thinking that tenure is a really good way to do that.
So I think it partially answers it. But so moving forward though, the recommendation is in implementation that an implementation group would look at taking those term faculty and putting them into one of these tenure track lines that would grant academic freedom protections, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's just, again, I'm not in the space, but I think that there's definitely a divide between, sometimes the way that faculty talk about tenure, the way that HR talks about tenure, kind of the way that senior administration talks about tenure. I've never heard, I mean, this is exposing myself for, not knowing something, but I've never heard of somebody qualifying for tenure for being just an excellent employee that's been in their position a long time. I've always thought of it as, this person needs protections for the type of research they're conducting so that they're not being forced to come up with results. But that's just conceptually the way that some people talk about tenure, right? So I think that there's that's maybe some of the issue is we think about it in different ways and what that actually means. And I know we're at time, but is there anything else you wanted to share with the group while we still have you?
I
So
guess I would reiterate the point that teaching is plenty good to get one to earn tenure, right? Research is not required, and so it is how it's sort of done here now in lots of departments, right? But there's no reason for that in the tenure code, and so you know if we think of what happened at Hamlin University, this person who was not renewed, they were excellent at their job, but they were in this precarious category of employment, and they didn't have protections for their academic freedom. And so, figuring out how do we ensure our faculty, all faculty who are teaching, have those protections is what this is about. And so, it is a shift in thinking from research is the only thing that gets you tenure to teaching can also on its own be a reason for earning tenure. So.
Molly, just sorry, just to Tony, just to sort of add to that, it's not we're not talking about tenure for being a good employee. It's for being good at an intellectual job like teaching or research. And the second part of it is that both of these things, whether it's teaching or teaching and research or just research, all of them actually require academic freedom, right? In class, you want to have the freedom to expose ideas without feeling that your job is in jeopardy because of the way you approach it, right? Because somebody might object to the views that you express in class, even though you sort of examine it in a thoughtful way and in an intellectual way. So it's important also for teaching. Right?
Well, thank you, Eric and Gopalan, for joining us this morning. We really appreciate your time. And Molly and I will be sure to follow up with any lingering questions. I'm sure we'll think of more. We're good at that, and get that to you shortly.
No, we're eager to see those and respond. And if you have a chance to like send us the chat, right? I see a lot of questions. I can't multitask on that. We could get back to folks that way too. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make a copy of all those comments.
cool. Great. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks for having us. It was a
Thank
pleasure to
you.
talk to you folks. Yeah. Bye.
Goodbye. Um, okay, we'll get moving on to our next item. It might not need the full time, but just so we're not falling behind, we have proposed changes to the Constitution, bylaws, and rules. And Amber Banfke from the University Senate office is going to talk to us a little bit more about what those changes are.
Hello, everybody. As Tony said, my name is Amber Bathke. I'm the Senior Senate Associate in the University Senate office. And so hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at the memo that was shared, and then linked from the memo, it was it's the full Constitution, bylaws, and rules for all the Senate. So I realize it's very extensive, but that it has all the complete changes that we are proposing to the P&A sections of those. But the memo has kind of just the major pieces, which is kind of what I'm going to quickly outline now. And I apologize, I didn't put together a PowerPoint. Usually I do, but hopefully you can follow along in the memo. So the only substantive changes to the to the Constitution, bylaws, and rules that we are proposing are in the bylaws. There are minor changes proposed in both the Constitution and the rules. But the major ones are to provide a provision for election by default if there are fewer candidates than seats available for a given election. So I know we run across this quite often where many of you may have run unopposed in an election, and yet we still had to run the election, it just seems like kind of a silly waste of time, and people get, confused about it. Like, there's only one person. Why do I have to vote? And so that is just that we're just writing in to the bylaws here, a provision that if we have one seat and one person running, we don't have to do the formal election. Likewise, if there's like two seats and only one person running. And that would be for both being elected to the P&A Senate and being elected to the University Senate from the P&A Senate. clarify that the chair and chair-elect can go beyond the 6-year eligibility rule. So another thing we seem to every few years have to redecide how to do this, because often the people who run for chair-elect are people who have been on the Senate for a while, and then we're like, okay, so they if they're a chair-elect, then it's a 2-year process, basically, chair and chair-elect. But if their eligibility is up after 1 year, then it's confusing. And we've kind of gone back and forth over the years, like, should that be allowed, or is it like, no, you have to have 2 years of eligibility left to run for chair-elect. So we think it doesn't make sense to require that, and there are the faculty consultative committee does it this way too, where the chair and chair-elect can go beyond the 6 years. So that's what we're proposing for the P&A Senate and the Civil Service Senate too, incidentally. Um, Add a provision to allow the Senate office to conduct elections at the request of the unit. So right now the bylaws say that each unit should be running their elections, and that is preferable, but sometimes it's hard to identify a person sometimes to run the election, or for whatever reason, the unit just like they have no capacity to do it. They're understaffed. There's multiple reasons why they may request that. And so just putting in there that if requested and if our staff have capacity, then we can help with those as well. Um, there's an update related to procedures for interpretations to policies. This is under Article 3 committees of the P&A Senate. These provisions in the bylaws go back to the time before the 90s, when senates actually did make policies, and it was more the university senate and the faculty senate. But the P&A Senate bylaws were sort of created based on those. And so essentially what that means is this is a provision that doesn't make sense anymore, because senates no longer create policy. They consult on and can, propose, but they don't have final control. And so just making some tweaks to that language to make it make sense within the current policy framework. And actually, I've gone over all of the major changes. So um, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those. I will just note quickly too that we had originally proposed doing away with the elected alternates, simply because this is the only Senate that has elected alternates in this way. Um, Pat, when we talked to PAC about this, PAC expressed some concerns about that idea, and so we crossed it out. We're not trying to make waves or anything. We're just trying to make things make sense and to run more smoothly. So, yeah, questions, comments?
Seeing a quick question in the chat. Um, Doing away with elections for seats with only one candidate, is there an option to write in candidates during the election? Oh, there is currently an option to write in candidates, so it's lost with that change. And then is it stated how far beyond the 6 years people can go?
Um, it is not stated. I mean, I think the implication is that the way that it works for the faculty consultative committee is that once they've fulfilled the sequence of chair elect or vice chair and then chair, um, then they're off. Um, and then, I mean, there's past chair too, but that's, I believe, an ex officio position anyway. I'd have to double check that. Um, and then let's see. Well, the chat is moving fast. Okay, the other.
Hey,
the right-
Amber, I wanna pop in because some of the chat got really stuck up on what you said last. So Amber only brought up that we discussed removing elected alternates. It is no longer part of what we are talking about today. So do not worry about that. You don't need to debate it in the chat. We are not removing elected alternates. So please focus on the things that are in the version that Amber has proposed today.
Thanks, Molly. Yep. In consultation and, good faith, that is what we decided on after discussion with PAC. So anyway, getting back to the question on the write-in candidates. No, that does get away. That does kind of do away with the write-in candidate option. To
Folks
me,
would have an opportunity to nominate before, though, right?
right.
Because it would go out to the whole unit. So maybe we
Yes.
just need to emphasize to folks more, if you're going to write in a candidate, you should do so at the nomination stage and not at the election stage.
Yeah, that's a really good way to do it. Because we certainly do want to preserve that option, but realistically, if there's an actual candidate and then a write-in candidate on probably the write-in candidate isn't going to get enough votes anyway. But if they are written in on the nomination end, then they can be put as a viable candidate if they agree to do so. So that makes it makes it a little, yeah, more likely for them to be elected in the first place.
Not seeing any other questions. Are we ready? I actually didn't even check with Jacqueline. Jacqueline, are we ready for a vote on this?
I believe so. Amber, do we need to separate out like constitution, bylaws, rules? Are we voting on all the proposed changes in a single vote?
I would say just do a single vote. It would be, if we get enough votes to approve the constitutional changes, then obviously the other ones would also be approved. The constitutional changes, those are minor, but it's often takes two meetings to get those approved just because we need two-thirds of, what is it? Two-thirds majority of all voting members of the Senate to approve those. So we might get it, but if not, then the Constitution ones may come back. I'm hoping we can approve the bylaws changes today, but if not, then we can do that the second time too.
And then as a reminder for everyone, senators can vote, alternates cannot vote unless your senator is absent today and that they informed you that you would be attending on their behalf. Also, the past chair cannot vote. I didn't see if he's here, Kit, but and then I think the chair does not vote, and I don't know about the chair-elect, but I will go back and validate all of the votes after the fact. But I will launch the poll. Ten more seconds if you wish to vote. Last call. Let's see. So we have 65 yes and 2 no. Amber, can you remind me what the numbers were that we needed to hit for that?
Well, it's two-thirds of all voting members of the Senate, which I think you said there are 84 voting members. In which case, I think we passed all the amendments. Which is this actually might be like a first passing constitutional amendments on the first try. So way to go.
Thank you, P&A.
Yay.
Thanks all for your work on this year.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to move right along to our subcommittee reports. I didn't allocate anyone to go first, but let me see who's on my screen. I know Brian's here. Do you want to start with, and if Pamela's here as well, the benefits and compensation report? Oh, maybe not. Let me see.
Brian was having technical difficulties earlier, so he may still.
Oh, that's right. Shoot. Okay. Sorry. I'll give you another minute and we'll try to go to communications. And Angel and Lydia, are you here? See Angel.
Hi, everyone. For communications, we are getting ready to update the P&A infographic this spring. And I'm throwing it in the chat just so that you can see what it is. I know that the chairs have used this several times over the last 4 years since it's been developed. Used it to present to Minnesota legislation. They've used it to present to the regents, and it kind of showcases this diversity of the P&A group. And so we are looking to feature some new P&A employees this spring. And we usually use this for about a year, and then we ask if you want to be featured again. Some people have changed positions. So we're looking for somebody as an administrator, a director, a lecturer, a researcher, a specialist, a coach, a manager, and extensions. So if you would like to nominate yourself, or if you have a colleague to nominate, we would love to get those nominations. So I threw Lydia and also my email on the Senate meeting reports. So Corey, thank you for thanks for putting some nominations in the chat too. So if you'd like to throw some nominations in the chat, that would be great. And that's an update from communications.
Thanks so much. Let's go to outreach next. Kim and Casey.
Before outreach starts, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can, Brian. Go right ahead.
I can, no, I'll go next. That's fine.
Kim, go ahead.
From outreach? Okay. Hi, I'm Kimberly Clark. Casey and I are the co-chairs for outreach. First, the outreach committee has continued to send out welcome emails to the newly hired P&A employees. And we also helped with the midterm elections. So right now, I'm not sure if I should read all of these, but we've got a lot of alternates and senators seated. But we still need representation from athletics, all positions. Budget and finance, we need an alternate. CBS, we need an alternate. CCAPS, we need an alternate. GPS, alternate. OACA, I don't know what that is. We need an alternate. OED, OIT, President's Office, Public Affairs, and Public Health. We all need alternates. So beat the bushes, talk to your friends, encourage them to think about being part of P&A Senate. It takes a village.
Great. And we'll now go to Brian for benefits and compensation.
Okay, so quick question now. Are we just doing our subcommittee meetings from last month or both months because we didn't have this meeting last month?
Just anything since the last meeting that you wanted to update the group on. So it can be both if you want.
Okay, so This last month, Ashley Moeller and Katie Kalaji presented university retirement health insurance plans and how the enrollment works when you're approaching retirement or in retirement. In that presentation, there's a lot of good information about the retiree medical marketplace transition, and some of the information covered included what the process looks like for how OHR actually reaches out to individuals approaching retirement so that they know the options that are available to them. John Brentnell also presented an update and a refresher, plus a full information package on the university's various deferred tax retirement plans, like ORP versus 457, and the specific differences between them. There was a good discussion about why individuals may want to select one or the other or both. And they provided really good information on contribution limits, how this is handled, and some of the watch out situations an individual should be aware of if they're at risk of over contributing due to additional contributions in non-university offerings. We had some new business discussion about future planning and subcommittee general clarification on PTO policies and things as well. So if I go back a month before that, Paula Merrill had come and presented an update on the annual salary structure for 2026 and explained the process for market refinement and how that structure is updated annually to align with external market data. Paula also provided statistical metrics on salary structure refinement findings and adjustments to inform the group on general outcomes of the effort, such as like communicating that the effort affected actually like 90% of university employees. And like 9% of those entire job classes, medians, and ranges were moved up, and like less than 2% came down. The remaining time was spent in discussions about like adjacent topics affected by the effort, like how compensation minima and maxima are determined and managed, explaining letter grades associated with some positions when you see them in the reporting center on what they mean. The challenges associated with that annual effort, and discussion of input and feedback from the subcommittee about ways some of those challenges may be addressed or overcome in the future. That's it.
Great, thanks so much. Last we have PD&E, Joshua and Alex.
Hi, y'all. Can you hear me okay? Okay. These are not the headphones I would usually use for this, so I'm never quite sure they're gonna work. All right, I just dumped a whole bunch of links into the chat that are all the links from our report, but I'll go over it again. We had a November and a December event. The November one was with the Office of Conflict Resolution, and the recording and closed captioning for that recording are available. So I posted the link to the P&A Senate's YouTube channel for the recording to that first event. The second recording from December was with the Office of Research Ethics or something like that. I'm forgetting the name of that center now, or office now, but it was on research misconduct and research ethics. And that recording should be available any second now. We had sort of the person who was closed captioning that event had sort of an emergency and was called away. And so we had to pivot and reassign the closed captioning for that recording, but it should be any day now that it's available. As for this term's worth of events, we've got two on the books. The first is actually next Thursday. It's Managing Up to Me, Creating Positive Supervisory Relationships. And you should have already gotten the flyer on that one from Jacqueline. CS is starting up a very similar seminar series, sort of inspired by what PD&E puts on. And one of their first events is, I think, the preceding day on a very similar topic. So we kind of lumped the advertisements to those two events together. So hopefully you'll see that and be encouraged. We're encouraging CS folks to come to our event and vice versa. So you should definitely think about looking into the CS event that is the previous day on a very similar topic. I know already that enrollment for that event is like 600 plus. So that seems to be a very popular topic, which I'm very excited about. Hopefully we'll all learn a lot from that. The second event that's already on the calendar for this term is going to be in April, early April. It's a follow-up. If you all remember last year, our committee put on a policy pop-up on the use leave policies that received quite a lot of engagement. We're doing a follow-up with OHR on that topic. And so that will be in April. Put that one on your calendar. I suspect that one will be very interesting. As a reminder, everything to do with our events is on the P&A Senate's website, so you can go there for not just the recordings, but the flyers, the Q&A notes documents, any other resources that were shared. Yeah, wow. Okay. It was 600-ish the last time Joshua and I had checked in. Now it's almost 800-ish. I think that's approaching a record for registrants for a PD&E event. So awesome. Let's keep adding to it because I'm greedy. The last thing I will mention is, PD&E has been super inspired by that flyer that the communications committee has been putting out over the last couple of years, that one pager, who is P&A? We want to have a similar one pager that is, here are all the places you can go to here at the U if you were an employee to seek professional development. And we are putting together a little document that is trying to compile what we know of in that direction, but it's going to take a village to put this together. So we are looking for any and all suggestions. Have you engaged with any professional development resources here at the U? Did you like them? What were they? Ideally, they'd be free, but they don't have to be free. Um, we're just trying to compile a list of them right now, and then our committee will try to organize them into a document. If you're interested in being involved in putting together the document, we'd love folks. They do not have to be on the PD&E committee to serve in that role. We'd be happy to have you. But at a very least, we all know that we only know about a sliver of the professional development opportunities that are available here at the U, because we each are in our own little lanes. And so we need your help compiling that list. So I put Joshua's email address in the chat. Please send him or me or both of us any thoughts you have when it comes to PD&E so that we can, professional development, so we can get that list created and out to you all and our constituents. Thanks. That's all I got.
Thanks, Alex. Last, I have my chair's report. Feels like we're doing this a little out of order because I started it with welcome back to spring term, everyone. But all the same, I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. I wanted to give an update that this past week, Molly Benzik, our chair-elect, and I, along with a number of you, attended a forum hosted by President Cunningham and Provost Ritter for university senators. So specifically looking at those who are serving in the university senate, not kind of the P&A in the broader senates. So I don't put anyone on the spot. In a minute, I'll open this up to others to see if you want to chime in with any thoughts. I spoke to a few of you. I'm sure I didn't speak to everyone, and I'm sure I don't remember your questions correctly. So please think about if there's anything you want to add in about that forum. It was approximately 100 to 150 senators. It was an in-person event in the Twin Cities, and I believe this was invite was open to everyone in the University Senate on a first come first serve basis. But again, being in person, it kind of limits the number of people that can be there. And I think we saw that with students. There were only a few student senators that were able to make it, but that might have been just the timing with classes as well. The floor was largely open to questions to the president and the provost. Some of the questions included things like some on the Twin Cities campus expressing concern about immigration enforcement on campus, and expressing a desire for more timely communication from administration. So the president made note of that concern, though confirmed that as of that time, there'd been no activity on university property. There were questions about the now approved agreement between the university and physicians in Fairview, and I'm sure there's more coming out about that still. There were questions around renaming specifically the formerly Nicholson Hall, which is now just known by its address. It also sounds like there's more to come on that. And others just wanted to hear more from the president and the provost about what good is coming out of the university right now. It feels like we're all sort of bogged down at this time of year. Like, what are we doing in our outreach efforts? What are we doing for Minnesotans right now? Overall, I thought it was a really positive experience. It was nice to be able to speak directly with the president and the provost, both before and during the actual forum. And it got a lot of us talking to each other, which is also really helpful. But for those others in attendance, I know I didn't cover everything. Do you have any additional thoughts from that forum? And you can go ahead and unmute. You don't need to raise your hands.
I would certainly add that a faculty colleague and I certainly pressed fairly um, passionately about the fact that our department is well known by the president and provost for our like excellence in teaching. And we expressed that like regardless of the decision making, the short-term extensions are, not really functional for those of us who care like, very deeply and academically and research-wise about teaching. I guess in a slightly positive way, the announcement that came out is slightly a move in the right direction because it came out with more notice. We may disagree with the decision, a lot of us in the department, but at least it was conveyed in the way that we requested. So I'll take that as somewhat of a win that the communication strategy was a little better.
I asked the president and provost about support or efforts the university is making to redress decisions by the Department of Education as far as student loans for what's considered professional and not professional, because that has a significant effect on the School of Social Work and our MSWs, but also nursing, nurse practitioners, teaching. There's a bunch, public health, there's a bunch of professions that are negatively impacted. And so the president and provost were pretty supportive, in my opinion, and said that the university is working on addressing some of those issues.
When they were talking about communication, I think there were a lot of people in the room that wanted more communication around the current situations. And while the provost and the president agreed to step up communication from Central, they also said they're meeting regularly with deans. The provost is meeting regularly with deans, and there's a lot of decisions and communications that is the responsibility of deans. So if there are things that you feel need more communication in your units, you should be in touch with your deans on some of those.
Holding space for any others. Last call. Well, thank you to everyone who was able to attend. I was surprised so many of us were able to make it in person. And it sounds like the president and the provost intend to continue doing those forums moving forward with different audiences, including with sort of governance and with the Senate. So we'll certainly take every opportunity to participate in those moving forward as well. Moving right along and kind of goes along with some of those thoughts. We want to get folks thinking about Senate leadership positions for next year. So it feels early, but it's not. We are fully into spring term now. And we actually determined that our elections for our subcommittee co-chairs and our new chair-elect are going to take place at our next meeting, so March 27th. Sometimes we have an April meeting, we don't this year, so we opted to go earlier. For those who don't know or might have forgotten, because it's easy to do, the co-chairs of each of our four subcommittees, so the folks who just gave us updates, along with our chair-elect, and the former chair, who's an ex officio, all make up the P&A Consultative Committee, or PAC. So whenever we're talking about PAC, we're talking about the co-chairs and the chair and chair-elect and former chair meeting and talking about issues before we bring them to the Senate. This year, if you're elected into one of those positions, you'll have a special opportunity that we don't normally have to attend two what we call super PAC meetings rather than one. We refer to it as super PAC when it's the current year and the next year's groups all together. We structured it this way because we have a spring PAC meeting with President Cunningham, and we wanted to make sure that members were elected in time to be able to attend that meeting. We think it's going to help with the transition going into next year to continue some of these lines of thoughts. I know some of us won't be in our same positions moving forward, so wanting to make sure that work continues. So think critically about running for leadership positions in the next year. I'll once again put people on the spot to talk about their experiences. Members of PAC, you don't need to speak, but if you know that you're going to need a new co-chair for next year, think about taking a moment to share your experiences out with folks so they kind of know what to expect. I'll just say I started in governance 8 or 9 years ago, something like that. I was formerly on the Senate Committee for Educational Policy before I did anything with the Senate. And then joined the P&A Senate. I was on for, I believe, 2 years, right in the height of COVID is right when I joined. And at that point ran for outreach co-chair, and I served that position for 2 years before running for the chair-elect. It's been an overwhelmingly positive experience. It's something that seemed very intimidating from the outside, but it is something that once you get in it, you find that there is a tremendous amount of support for the work that you're doing, and it's not nearly as intimidating as it seems. It's rewarding. You get to know about how the university works. You have opportunities to attend meetings with senior leaders and broaden your network. And perhaps the most important thing, you're not just providing service to the university, but you're doing something that looks great on your CV. So I'm always going to promote that as an individual gain for folks as well. But I will go ahead and see if anyone from PAC wants to share out anything. I would put Molly on the spot first, but she had to join another meeting. Any of our co-chairs for this year want to just share what
Oh,
your experience was like serving in the role?
yeah, I can go.
Thanks.
Yeah. Uh, so maybe it's good that I go because I would say I'm probably not one of the better co-chairs for subcommittee. I've found that um, for me with some of my anxiety and everything, it was a little difficult. But the thing is like it's actually not that bad, and you get through it, and you learn a lot more than just going to the meetings. And everybody else is like super helpful. It's not a huge time commitment. If you're swamped, it can be a little bit stressful at times just to make sure that things are in when they're supposed to be in. But there's not much, and if if people are reticent to maybe stick their hand up to be a co-chair for, I can think of like almost like any reason, chances are that reason is not a good one to not do it. I recommend it. It's good for your professional growth. It gives you a different perspective on what it takes to like run all of the different Senate branches and arms and things like that. Having a co-chair really makes it so that you're not on the spot and you got a little help with it. And if you're thinking about maybe doing it, but a little bit nervous, grab a co-chair and just stick your hand up for it because it's definitely very tenable and it's a good experience. Yeah. And that's coming from somebody who's maybe not one of the best co-chairs out there. Like I have a backlog of things that I need to get to people with that have reached out and I'm working on that and stuff. But don't let that hold you back.
Brian, I think that's everyone has a backlog of things to do right now, so
Yeah, yeah.
don't be too hard on yourself. Alex, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll share something since it's my second year being a co-chair on a committee. A couple things I would say. First, serving in any capacity on P&A Senate is a passion thing. Like this is a no one's paying us to be here, kind of. Like it's everything we do and accomplish is optional. And I would say if you think you have anything that you are passionate about that could help anyone else here at the U, being in a position to be a co-chair allows you to exercise that passion and produce something that might help your colleagues out. So that's one reason. A second thing I will say is I feel more like an usher or a wrangler than I do a leader. I mean, PD&E is such a great committee and such a great community. Uh, it kind of doesn't. It's not like it's a um all the responsibility is falling on you as a co-chair, right? I think everybody who is in your committee is going to volunteer to help you do things. The buck does not stop with you. Everything we put on with PD&E is a team effort, and it's maybe just the extra responsibility comes from helping to wrangle those teams into some sort of structure. So I never feel like I have, something falls entirely on me unless I volunteered for it to be that way. And then the last thing I will say is one of the major perks of being a co-chair is you get to join PAC. PAC is really cool. I feel like whoever encouraged me to become a co-chair totally undersold PAC because PAC is super interesting. You get to learn about really high level stuff happening at the U before anyone else, and you get to be in the room where the stuff is happening and the interesting things are being talked about. Like, you know, we got to be in a room of like 12 people with the president a couple of months ago, and that's really cool. You get to have a conversation with somebody that it may not be very easy to have a conversation with a lot of times. And so I have personally found that very interesting as a co-chair.
Can I just interject one thing quickly? I was going to mention this, and then Alex mentioned it perfectly, and so I'm going to second this. Like, having a seat at the table in PAC is such a huge perk. Like, if you are in Senate at all because like you want to make a change, you want to have the answers for your constituents and everything, this is like the next step that like really gets you at a seat at the table, where a lot of people don't see stuff coming down, and you do, and it allows you to like have a voice to make changes and advocate for things in a really effective way. So huge perk for being a chair or a co-chair.
Thanks, Brian. Lydia?
Yeah, thank you for letting me speak. So, Angel and I are co-chairing the communications committee, and I just wanted to share that this kind of relationship between two co-chairs can be structured differently depending on the people who are involved. And in our case, Angel is actually the top chair, and I'm only there in case things fall through. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can have the equal relationship, but it also doesn't have to be equal, right? It depends on what kind of load you have, what kind of work or family or health. It can be all worked out around your personal commitments and your schedule. And Angel and I also develop amazing friendship and support each other on personal level and share about kids and lives, and it's just been wonderful to have that kind of a friend. So basically, what I'm saying is, I wanted to talk about our actual committee. We have people with different gifts and skills. So we have someone from actual OHR, and she speaks from that point. We have someone with a design and Canva experience, and they will do our one pager that everybody's praising about. So what I'm saying, you are not actually carrying all that work and load. You have people who do different things. You split work, and really, it's not easy and not a time commitment at all. So wonderful, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone that shared out. I would just say, I'm sure Molly won't mind me saying, if you have questions about serving in like the chair-elect role and you want to reach out to one of us, if you have questions about any of the subcommittees, I'm sure the co-chairs would be happy to hear from you. Just drop folks an email and we'll be happy to follow up. I'm also happy to get a coffee if somebody just wants to talk through logistics of like, well, what do you actually do as chair? In which case, I will tell you it's a lot of agenda planning. So if you like planning agendas, you will be well served in that role. But yeah, just please reach out, please consider. When we come back at our next meeting, we'll have those elections. And like I said, a really good opportunity to get involved with PAC a little bit early this year, hopefully make a really strong transition into next year. Next, an update from Government and Community Relations. Last month, I had an opportunity to meet with several folks from their office and wanted to pass along some information to all of you. about the current bonding bill request and the upcoming day at the Capitol. Right now, I believe the Senate starts their session around the 17th. So sometime later this month, we know that bonding bill is going to be heard. Um, the main priority is HEAPR, the name of the priority. It's a lot of building repairs. So essentially, what I heard from them is it's certain buildings are being targeted. However, basically any building across any of our campuses, with the exception of those that are leased, which I think are primarily in Rochester, um, that funding is going towards needed renovations in that space. There's a separate request for a reinvestment in St. Paul campus and a separate request again for renovations to the School of Dentistry because they're having issues with instruction because of the facilities. So those are all things that are kind of on the docket to get in front of the state and ask for funding for the university. For those who want to engage in this opportunity, I think it goes really well with Senate service if it's something you're potentially interested in. February 24th this year, which is a Tuesday, I believe, is going to be the day at the Capitol. So they let me know there's no rally at the Rotunda this year, but it's mostly just we want a lot of folks there wearing maroon and gold who are happy to talk about, what they do at the university, and the value of their work. So if anyone is interested in attending, I know I will be there. Hopefully I won't be the only one there. But I'll be there on the 24th for the day at the Capitol. And they also, when I spoke to the government and community relations folks, they said, in addition to, say, attending the day at the Capitol, if anyone wanted to make statements about the bonding bill specifically, if you work in a super outdated building with facilities that you want to tell the government that it's not acceptable that you have, that's a great way to plug the need for this funding. You can also reach out to Kia Steele with UMN Advocates. They have a special group of advocates who does this kind of governance work. And it's a volunteer role that you can kind of take on in addition to everything else. Um, Additionally, and we don't know when yet, at some point, probably this month, the bonding bill will actually be heard at the Capitol. We'll probably only get a 1 or 2 week notice for a meeting that'll either be Tuesday or Thursday. And it's going to be pretty quick. It's normally like inside an hour, there's presentation and then questions. But when that bill is actually heard, they're hoping to kind of pack the stands with folks wearing maroon and gold. So another opportunity if you wanted to, kind of quickly get involved and then get back to work, could be an option. I'll be sure to send that information out to folks when I hear about it, when it's actually going to be held. So there should be some more upcoming opportunities for engagement that way. Additionally, and I thought this was a unique kind of perk, they let me know that any university, staff member, someone who works here, who wants to just connect with their legislatures, like they can work with government and community relations and they'll help you make those connections. So if you really want to get a coffee with your congressman, it's something that could potentially happen. So I think especially going into hearing this bonding bill, some of the other things that we have going on in the state right now, it's just a really unique and cool opportunity to get involved. So I wanted to pass it along to everyone. If there aren't any questions on that, I will keep going. Feel free to pop stuff in the chat as well. The last item we had for today was actually a conversation that came up through our items for consideration form. We received a comment from someone who was having struggles with leave increments of less than 4 hours. So they intended for this to apply to both sick and vacation leave. And my understanding is the vacation leave, it's really not something that you should be entering for like a half day at a time. I was going to have Molly talk about this more because she's in a supervisory position. But so suffice to say, I don't think we're discussing the sick leave at this time. I think that that's the way that it's supposed to be implemented is that um, folks wouldn't have to submit every time they have a minor absence through the sick leave if they're in a P&A position. But we are hearing from some folks that the vacation piece might be a little challenging still. Um, so for I guess the question to the group is, are others hearing issues in their unit or having issues related to the minimum vacation leave of 4 hours? And or minimum, if you're hearing folks talking about sick leave, we'd want to know that as well. Um, Traditionally for vacation, most of us would know, anything less than 4 hours, you're just supposed to like flex and absorb that work in your own way. So either you don't need that time or you work late or you do whatever it is you do and you get your work done. But there have been folks that we've heard from, including this comment, who would like opportunities to document smaller periods. They just, I want to be off for this hour and I don't want to have to make it up some other time. I just really need to be gone. Um, there's also potential that this could, for some are in supervisory roles, there may be a desire to better document when coverage is needed. That's kind of a secondary issue, but related. But if this is a common concern, it's the sort of thing that we can bring back to HR and request policy change around. So I wanted to kind of open it up to the group in the chat. Raise your hands. Are other folks hearing about concerns about the length of leave not being able to select lengths of leave less than 4 hours? Seeing some comments in the chat already. Oh, perfect. So Josh made the point, the PD&E April event is going to cover sick time as well, which is always a great refresher because I feel like I have to ask my supervisor every time something comes up. I'm seeing some other comments that there's confusion about sick time as well. Yeah, I think the transition from short leave to extended leave is probably where I have the most questions as well. Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe since it keeps coming up in the chat, I'll just speak up. Yeah, the PD&E subcommittee for that event met with a bunch of folks, including some higher level folks at OHR last week, and I made a specific pitch. Again, maybe it's a little outside of what you asked, but sort of to clean up the passions from last year instead of just kind of moving past it. They're going to come with what they're asserting a very clear answer with how P&A sick time should work and kind of where that transition, because I think we've found a way to talk about it as day 1 through 3 versus day 4 and on, which is how the policies are written. And I think I will always believe we need to have a sick time, something with sick time actually documented, even if it's documenting that it's up to the manager. I think they need to write it down somewhere, even if they're whatever answer they're telling us. So I would also encourage everyone who registers for that webinar to please pass these questions along because they're going to get them ahead of time. And I'd like to show that it's a large matter that they need to not just talk about the event, but also make some policy changes or policy clarifications.
Thank you, Josh. I know I'm certainly going to have that on my calendar because I could use a refresher around all of this as well. Yeah, it does sound like the sick time is more of a concern potentially than the vacation. Yeah, and normally the intent with P&A is that your hours aren't being micromanaged. You're just supposed to get your work done. However, we do hear from folks that that's not always the way our rules are structured in practice. So certainly want to keep aware of that. Oh yeah, Josh, do you have the link for the webinar?
In short, no, we haven't set it up yet.
Okay. I assume something's coming out though, a reminder for that webinar in April.
Yes, we're just due to just organizational complexity, it's just going to take them a bit to pull everything together for us.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm sure a number of us will be there. It sounds like there are questions. And, I feel like, to put myself on the spot, I kind of probably do a different thing every time I'm sick. I either tell my supervisor or I don't, or I enter it. And it's just always kind of worked out. So it's not been an issue, but I'm sure that I'm doing it wrong somehow. So I will greatly appreciate that information as well. Not hearing any additional questions. We don't have any old business that we need to return to. Did anyone want to propose new business for the group? Hearing none, I think I might be able to give you a little bit of time back, so I'm happy to do that. I know a lot of us are going through a lot right now with the spring term and admissions and ongoing other issues in our cities, our various workplaces. Thank you all for the amazing work you do. Please be sure to refer to resources as they're shared by the president and the provost around accommodations for remote work and remote classes for students. As Joshua said, we right now know that that's continuing at least until the 16th, and it sounds like there's more information to come on that. Thank you all so much. I will be sure to follow up if anything comes up in the space with the AF&T report before our next meeting, but otherwise, Molly and I will share out what we hear back from Eric and Gopalan at that time. Thank you all so much. We're adjourned.